Linus Pauling is a Dutch chemist, and he was particularly famous for the number of ideas that he came up with. And he was asked, how do you come up with these ideas? And he said, well, what I do is generate lots of ideas and throw away the bad ones. And I thought, oh, that's quite fun, quite interesting. And the blog that was picked up from was another chemist who was giving a kind of a recipe on how to generate good ideas. And what he did was try to come up with an idea every day and write down a list and tick off the good ones. And to be honest, it just struck me as appalling. It's very Thomas Edison in its approach. You basically get yourself a walnut, get yourself a sledgehammer and crack it damned hard many, many times. And that's what Edison did. Edison, his famous quote is that invention is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. And when somebody talks about these things, what they're really doing is talking about themselves. So it tells you a lot about Edison. Edison was a slugger. He didn't care as long as he just lined up 1,000 experiments for one thing that he wanted to look at. He would just hammer away and get his results and do it. And Pauling seems to be a very similar kind of character, and certainly the guy who wrote the blog was, because his idea is just line up these things and whack them with a sledgehammer, eventually you'll come up with something. And as an approach, I can see that that would work for some people. Why not? But it's very much a sort of product of the Western mind. It's a product of the way that we think. If you think about our education, we're taught to repeat things time and time again until they're in there. The idea being that once they're in there, we can drag them back out and use them creatively. Well, we can't. Creativity to me is like a muscle. It's one of those things that the more you use it, the stronger it gets. You have to exercise it. When you go through the Western education system, it's not encouraged, it's not exercised. And so it gets very, very weak, and it becomes very difficult for people to be creative. Not because they're not creative in themselves, but because somebody's taken that sledgehammer and hammered it out of them, and then when you get to the end of your university or your doctorate, somebody takes another sledgehammer and demands that you be creative. And of course people fail, and they get pretty upset about failing. Now, when I was a kid, I actually did the 100 metres, and my 100 metres time wasn't brilliant. It was 13 seconds. But if you think about what the world record is, I think it's something like 9.6, 10 seconds, something like that. It's only about a 3-second difference. That 3 seconds, of course, is all the difference. But if you think about it, what is the difference between me, little fat kid running in my gym shorts flapping in the wind, and Usain Bolt, who just tears down the track? Well, the difference is years of practice and 3 seconds. So in order to gain that extra 3 seconds to become the top of what he's doing, it's taken him years. And that's the way it is with human effort. It takes us an awful lot of time and practice in a particular field, a particular way of doing something, in order to achieve 1, 2, 3 seconds over your neighbour. It's not very much, and it takes a long time to do it. So when we go through the education system, and we spend all those formative years learning to think one way, it's no wonder that it's so difficult to think the other way. And it is, it's difficult. So what is creativity? Well, I always say that it's not actually that special. What it is, it's about looking at the world. Now, when you look at the world, you have to notice it. And noticing it is something that we don't do very much of. We look at it, sure, but we look at it in the same way that people look at the world when they live in a beautiful part of the world. So if you live in somewhere like the Lake District, it's very beautiful, and you live there, you don't actually notice it. You go and do your shopping, you go to work, you drive home, you're half asleep most of the time. When you get your bags and you put them in the boot of the car, you don't stop, take a breath, look up at the mountains around you and think, I live in a beautiful part of the world. That rarely happens. But that's what creativity is about. Creativity is the same kind of thing. You've got to put down your bags of shopping. You've got to stand up, look around at the mountains, take a deep breath and say, hey, this is beautiful, this is interesting, this is exciting. Once you adopt that kind of approach, then you start to notice things around you. And that's all it really is. So you think about these paints that we've been doing recently. What is it about those paints? Well, particularly on the swag paint, as I explained in a previous video, all that really happened there was I thought, hang on a sec, let's give this a go, let's see what I can notice. And I took it down to the seaside, chucked it in, beautiful day, and noticed what happened. That's all that happened. It was completely luck, if you like, because I'm working in that field, plus a little bit of looking at my world. And that's how you invent things, and that's what creativity is. Now, I have a very favourite writer, as it happens, a couple of them actually, Nikos Kazantzakis, who's all but the Greek, and another guy called Colin Wilson. And Colin Wilson did something called The Criminal History of Mankind. And in that, he talks about why people become criminals, why our thoughts go down a particular path. And it's got a lot more to do with how others see us that reflects how we see ourselves. So to quote Colin Wilson, he says that we see ourselves in the mirror of other people's eyes. And you do. You get your sense of self-worth from the ideas that those around you have. So if somebody tells you constantly you can't be creative, eventually you begin to believe it and you stop being creative. Somebody who's around you constantly telling you that it's easy to be creative and you're in a creative environment, you will find suddenly that creativity starts to come much more easily. So when it starts to come more easily, you start to look at the world, you start to notice the world, and you're within a group of people who are like that, you'll find that creativity grows. That just like exercising a muscle, it gets stronger, until you get to a stage where actually you can't stop doing it. You look at everything and you think, oh yeah, that's interesting, I wonder if this will happen. And you just suddenly find yourself doing it without even trying to do it. So what is the secret to creativity? Well, it's pretty easy, really. It's about having faith in yourself. It's about being in a group of people who will support that idea rather than putting it down. And it's also about stopping, taking a breath, and having a look at the world. Now, to go back to Pauling and his idea of having lots of ideas and throwing away the bad ones, actually, although it's an interesting way of looking at things, I don't think it's strictly true, because to my mind, there are actually no bad ideas. When we label an idea as a good idea, what we really mean is it's appropriate to a set of circumstances and problems that we're suffering from right now. So energy generation, water desalination, that sort of stuff. They're top problems. They're problems that lots of people are interested in. So if you have some kind of solution to those problems, people think, oh, that's a good idea. But it isn't. It's only an appropriate idea. So ideas really don't split into good and bad in that way. They're only ideas. They may be appropriate to problem sets that we have or inappropriate to problem sets that we have, but they are by no means a good idea, and equally by no means a bad idea. It isn't possible to have bad ideas. If you think about things in terms of good and bad, of course, you start your creative experiments, you come up with a lot of ideas, you show them to somebody who's not supportive and they snigger and go, those are bad ideas. Then, of course, you reflect back on that, it pulls you down, and you stop being creative. And this happens all of the time. This is the common scenario that most people sit in, and that is a problem. If you're in an environment where you get a supportive kind of view of things and you don't differentiate between good and bad, you only look at appropriate and inappropriate, or useful and not useful, then you'll see for yourself almost immediately when you look down your list of ideas which ones can be applied to current situations where they would be found useful. And you'll just see that yourself. You don't need somebody to tell you that, you'll see it. And so you won't have bad ideas. You'll have these ideas, and the ideas will start to become stronger, and you'll get more and more of them, and you'll find ones that are appropriate just by the act of looking. So if you like, that's what happens with creativity. That's how you are creative. You just look at the world. It helps if you look at the world with a good community behind you. It's one of the reasons that I'm actually so keen on this community ethos, this idea that we all work together. Because we're all working together with respect for each other is the key to moving things forward, I think. Anyway, I hope that was of interest to you, and it wasn't too much of a ramble, and thank you very much for watching.